It's strange to think of a time before video game cutscenes. I'm so used to starting a game and having to sit through essentially a short film before getting to start playing. As games became more focused on telling larger stories, these cutscenes became all the more important in advancing complex plots that wouldn't be served by gameplay alone. When I think back to the games that made an impression on me when I was younger, I think often of their cutscenes and how they invited me into this new world, getting me excited to explore it. I'm reminded of the dramatic flight of the bird at the start of Fable 2 that sucked me in with its slow movement and heavenly chorus, or maybe just the hilarious retellings of famous scenes in LEGO Star Wars that allowed me to re-experience these films in a unique and entertaining way. But had I grown up in the early 80s, I wouldn't have had the same experience. It was an era where story was relegated to a last-minute addition at best, with the plot often left in the manual or on the back of the box. There are some early exceptions, of course. Space Invaders Part 2 had this brief cutscene when the player clears the screen. And the original Donkey Kong showed DK climbing up the rafters with Pauline before the game begins, but there's clearly a big difference between this and this. Obviously graphically, but also in the way it's presented, how the game creates an engaging narrative and facilitates the aesthetics of its genre rather than just ushering the player to the next level. Enter Ninja Gaiden, released as Shadow Warriors in Europe, the Tecmo platformer that, more than 30 years after its initial release, remains one of the most celebrated titles to ever grace the NES. But for all the praise rightly afforded to its tight controls, fast action gameplay, and insane difficulty, did I say praise? I meant anger, maybe just for that last attribute. But regardless of all its qualities, one feature has stood the test of time amongst all others, and changed video games forever. Ninja Gaiden was originally an arcade beat-em-up style game, but when developing the home console version alongside the arcade release, Tecmo decided to present an alternate version of the title for the Famicom and later the NES. This game was developed as a side-scrolling action platformer, with director Hideo Yashizawa taking inspiration from the Castlevania games, adding in the sword and giving Ryu the various extra weapons and techniques, such as the shurikens and spin attack. The biggest difference was the approach to story, however. Opposite the arcade game's vague and somewhat generic plot, the NES version introduced a detailed narrative that included several characters, all with their own motivations surrounding a mysterious set of statues that, when combined, awakened a world-ending demon, all encountered by Ryu on his quest to avenge the death of his father. It's a compelling story, but even this change paled in comparison to the way in which it was to be presented to the player. Yoshikawa wanted this title to oppose the current state of NES games, which he saw as having plots that were undervalued by players. He wanted to target these players with not only an interesting original story, but an engaging style of storytelling that he felt was absent from contemporary video games. So he split the story into various animated sequences that were shown over time as the player progressed through the game. As such, Ninja Gaiden was the first game to utilize cutscenes as we would recognize them now, with animation being displayed above text that together would advance the story. These weren't just sprites being moved to convey a plot development, but instead stylized action shots that utilized close-ups, shifting camera perspectives, and color effects to present a compelling narrative akin to a film. These techniques were influenced by contemporary manga styles and classic martial arts films, with Yoshikawa himself originally wanting to be a commercial filmmaker before joining Tecmo in the gaming industry. He said he was determined to put in a movie somehow, and he called this cutscene system Tecmo Theatre. Tecmo's director of sales and marketing argued that these inclusions made the home console version of the game superior to its arcade counterpart, as the story extended the game, and I have to agree. The already compelling drive to beat a difficult stage is taken further as the player wants to trigger the next cutscene and thus the next stage of the story. He also commented on the different reward system of a console game when compared to an arcade title, with the compelling cutscenes and advancement of the plot serving as part of this reward system. I think it's also worth mentioning that in an era where home console ports of arcade titles were so often inferior to their original games, this revolutionary use of cutscenes to tell an original story gives the NES version its own strength, and a reason to play it that is absent from the arcade version. Obviously, all arcade ports had a huge benefit in being playable at home, but these additions make for a home console experience that can stand alone without the shadow of a superior arcade version. The game begins with a duel between Ryu's father and an unnamed assailant, and this whole introductory sequence is phenomenal. Starting with a tracking shot to highlight the two fighters, we then get narrow close-ups of each man, first their faces and then their running legs, with tension building after every cut. The wide shot as they meet in slow motion looks fantastic, with the flash of the impact leaving a nervous silence as the winner is yet to be revealed. Having Ryu's father fall in the background allows for him to be the focus of the shot whilst his attacker can still remain in view, their upper half obscured to ensure their mystery identity but still in the frame to show how they will command Ryu's attention as he attempts to avenge his father. New characters are also introduced in creative ways, such as Irene, who appears in the frame as the camera pans past Ryu's face, his eyes in the foreground focus on his suspicion and mistrust. This shot feels like a scene from a Sergio Leone western. The picture also turns to black and white when Ryu gets shot, another great touch to further the impact of the bullet and the cliffhanger it creates. These features generate an intense drive to persevere with the game as the plot drip feeds a slow release of new characters, motivations and villains, twisting and turning as Ryu finds himself immersed in a journey much larger than the one he initially set out to complete. The identity of his father's killer, the mystery of the statue he finds, the dormant mythological forces that have now awoken, these are the story beats that keep playing. And near the end of the game, we get a great sequence of Ryu jumping out a plane before another tracking shot, this time to demonstrate the size and scope of the challenge that awaits inside the massive temple before him. It's the little touches, such as Ryu's clothes blowing in the wind, that really ensures this cinematic quality. This shot is mirrored at the end of the game, only now the focus is solely on the temple. Ryu's journey's finished, and watching it slowly become rubble is a fitting finale to such an action-packed adventure. The real appeal of Ninja Gaiden, though, is that these features only enhance an already addictive and well-designed experience, resulting in a title that would be enjoyable even without its groundbreaking narrative. As mentioned, the game is a side-scrolling platformer, with your sword being your main weapon of attack, alongside the various power-ups that you can collect throughout the level. Of these, the best is easily this jumping spin attack, which takes out every enemy that you encounter, although it also destroys all of the objects containing these power-ups, so I found myself losing it a lot by accident, apart from on the stages that took enough attempts to memorise where the various items were. See that container there? Grey shuriken, just saying. You also have a wall jump ability, which makes for some great platforming sections. It's a fantastic gameplay addition and ensures a variety of stage designs and layouts, rather than having the player simply walk to the right in every level. The move is very intuitive to control, with the only real challenge being the vulnerability to enemy attacks whilst clinging to a wall, and this section, in which you had to jump down a wall and so time your movements just right. Move too soon and you'll end up in a higher position, move too late and, well, you get the picture. This game is well known for being hard to beat, but really? This game? Difficult? I don't know what you've been playing, but yeah, this is a hard game, and I died so many times on my way to completing it, but because of these tight controls, these deaths are never frustrating. Okay, no, they are really frustrating, but what I mean is they never feel unfair. When you die, it's because you missed a jump, or you attacked at the wrong time, or you failed to turn around quick enough. They might feel frustrating because of your mistake, but never because of poor design or cheap difficulty. Maybe frustrating is the wrong word, I really mean infuriating. I thought that the game was hard, but Stage 5 seemed to raise the difficulty exponentially, only for Stage 6 to take it even further. It took me around 3 hours to beat Stage 6, and when I finally got to the boss, I was ecstatic. I didn't beat them the first time, and was ready to try again until... You've got to be kidding me. The game sends you back to the start of Stage 6. 3 hours of struggle rendered meaningless in an instant. Shocked would be an understatement. I appreciate the importance of a challenge and the reward of such a high difficulty, but this was the one time where I felt the game's difficulty became more deflating than simply challenging. I eventually managed to fight my way through the various stages, but still lacking the experience required to understand the various patterns of the boss, I died again. I'm not proud of it, but after several hours of failed attempts, of being lucky to even make it to the boss before dying almost immediately, I gave in. I was unable to play the game on my NES, and so was instead using the Switch, which has a rewind feature that I employed to give myself a chance to beat the final boss and trigger the final cutscene. I guess you could say I finished the game, but I didn't beat it. Maybe one day I will, and I did beat every boss eventually. I just used it to avoid repeating Stage 6 from scratch. I'm glad I got the footage for review here, but the experience wasn't very satisfying, especially compared to the elation of finally beating the earlier stages. Apparently, being sent back to replay the entirety of Stage 6 was a glitch that the programmers decided to leave in, and whilst it does make for an insane challenge, I wonder if it was the right decision, as after hours of the same stages over and over, I felt more than a little burned out. I'd love to complete it fully one day, but for now, this close attempt will have to do. The widespread adoption of cutscenes has since been criticised by various parties over the years. Some people find them intrusive, others feel that they're expendable and could be cut without impacting the actual gameplay. Game designer Raf Costa argues that the ease at which they can elicit emotion from the player ensures that the most memorable moments of games aren't being given by the game itself. Some critics simply feel that cutscenes belong to a different medium entirely. It's certainly true that many games can be enjoyable experiences and great examples of the genre without them. But Ninja Gaiden presents a perfect balance in my opinion, with cinematic cutscenes that tell an engaging story alongside a gaming experience that already feels complete and addicting to play. Wherever you fall on the advent of cutscenes in gaming, you can argue the impact of this game in demonstrating how this medium could tell larger stories than ever before, and with a style that could be praised for its visual aesthetic, not just for its graphics. If you enjoyed this look into a small piece of gaming history, then I'm glad you enjoyed it. If you were to like this video, it'd be really appreciated, and hey, you could even subscribe to check out some of the other content on this channel, most of which deals with the kinds of stories that this game made possible. But most importantly, thanks for watching.